was talking about bringing your, whatever you need, you have, bring it to the Lord this morning. But when you leave it, when you give it to Him, don't take it back.
That's it.
And a lot of times that's what we do, we take it back. Y'all won't believe this, but I'm a little nervous. Every time I get up here, whether it be to lead worship service or whatever. Today we're going to talk about spiritual seasons. How many of you ever feel like you're in a different season? We know we have, what is it, winter, summer, fall, and spring. Well, when James and I first started dating, I don't know why this came to my mind, but it did. I remember hearing him say one time about we were going somewhere and the sky was red, you know, and the saying is, red sky at night, he said, is a sailor's delight. And a red sky in the morning is a sailor's warning. I didn't think much about it. I asked him why he said it, so he began to tell me, you know, well, they say, you know, you can tell the way the water, fishermen can tell according to the sky. And after I got in church, which wasn't too terribly long after we got married, actually it wasn't even a whole year after we got married that I ended up gave my life to God and come back to Him, that I realized that was actually in the Bible. And it's Jesus talking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And it's Matthew 16, 2-3. And it says, He answered and said unto them, when it is evening, ye say it will be fair weather, for the sky is radiant. And in the morning, it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and lowering. O ye hypocrites, you can discern the face of the sky, but can you discern the signs of the times? We're going to talk about seasonings, and can you or do you recognize the seasons of life spiritually that you are in? We know right now, yesterday it felt like we were in the summer months, didn't it? And then today it feels like we're in winter. And that's how seasons in our spiritual walk, our spiritual man, go. They don't always, a season is for a short time, but sometimes those seasons overlap. Think about how many times we here in Louisiana don't have a summer. I mean, we don't have a winter. We definitely don't have much of a fall and a spring. We go from either being cold to hell's fire. I mean, that's just the way it is. You know, I wish that when we had a little bit of this winter stuff, we'd have a little white stuff, but it don't always happen that way. So, I'm going to talk about, it's important to discern the times, recognize the spiritual seasons that you are in through life. How many of you ever felt like you were in a season or in a dry spot? Maybe it only lasted a day. Maybe you knelt down to pray and you just couldn't pray. And so maybe you felt like that was a dry spot. Sometimes, remember, a season lasts for a period of time. If you've lived very long, now, Salem don't really know what no season is, but if you've lived any amount of time for God, then you know that there are seasons in your spiritual walk. So we're going to talk about 4 of them, if I can get finished with this. The first one is the wilderness. The second is warring. The third one is winning. And the fourth one is waiting. Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, to everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heavens. I wrote about Trace and Madison's honeymoon, and I scratched it all out. I probably should have kept that instead of writing what I did write. The first spiritual season that we're going to talk about is the wilderness. Some could compare the season of this season to the Sonora Desert. Hiking there, you have to make preparations. Trace and Madison are going to go hiking they're going to go to Gatlinburg for their honeymoon. They're going to go hiking. So Trace has already been aggravating the mess out of his daddy about making sure he's got everything he needs. And you think it's funny, or you think, well, you don't really need that. You're just going to Gatlinburg. But I was telling him, I have a good friend of mine, her and her husband go to North Carolina, Gatlinburg every year. And a couple years ago, they went hiking on a little trail, and on their way back, she fell. And she didn't just fall to the ground, she fell and tumbled down the mountain, or the hill, whatever. It was a mountain probably to us. And she hurt herself pretty badly, and she's a nurse, and he works for the coroner's office, and so they're both pretty much in the medical field, but they didn't have anything. They wasn't prepared for when they went into that, to do that. So we need to prepare ourselves for, you can't prepare yourself when you're in the middle of the battle. When you're in the middle of the wilderness, you can't prepare yourself because you're right dab in the middle of whatever's going on. So there's times in between those seasons that you've got to prepare. Just like a bear or, what animal can I use that squirrels or whatever, they store it for the winter, they get all their nuts beforehand, they can sense that the seasons are changing, right? So in our spirit, man, we ought to be able to sense when the seasons are beginning to change. So in preparation for such a thing like this, you might get water. Trace is getting a whole little backpack. His dad has a tactical bag, and I won't even go into what all's in that bag. But you probably could live for a week or so on that bag. And it's way more than just ammo and a gun, but I promise you that's in there too. You have to prepare yourself. And so you might take some snacks and some sunscreen and a hat if you were going in a desert place and you were going to be there for some time. Okay? So, because you never know what's going to happen. Okay? It's a place, the wilderness is going to be a place of deep spiritual reflection in the stark, dry surroundings of that desert, which are actually full of life. Is there not life in a desert? There's cactuses in a desert. Guess what? That cactus is alive. There's animals that have adapted to that environment and they live there. So we have to adapt to the spiritual seasons that we find ourselves in. God uses the wilderness season of our lives to teach us how to live and thrive in what is coming next. We see this in the life of King David. Years before he finally took the throne as the king, he spent many years in the wilderness learning lessons of survival, of leadership, of depending on God and seeking God's leadership. David went through a lot of seasons in his life. It's no different for us. At times we feel set apart. How many times do you feel like that you're all by yourself? Maybe I'm the only person. But I'm going to tell you a season that I've been going through, and I don't know why, but I have really, and I know why. I mean, we all know why when things come against us, when things oppress us, those things are not from God. Those things are from the adversary. They're from the enemy. And I've always been a more outgoing person. My sister, if you knew her, she was more to herself. She stood behind me a lot of times. If we went somewhere and she didn't know anybody, she didn't put herself out there. Me, I don't care if I know you or I don't. I'll talk to myself if I need to, but chances are I'm gonna strike up a conversation with somebody. James says, and the boys, they can't take me anywhere that I don't know somebody. But if I don't know somebody, Sister Brooke, I will meet you and I will begin to talk to you. I've done that many times, standing in line at Disney World. Sometimes you stand in them lines for a while, don't you, Sister Nella? And so you know what? I'm going to find somebody to talk to. James he will talk to me. I know he don't talk to a whole lot of people. He's quiet till you get to know him. But sometimes I feel, or I have felt lately, that especially since my dad passed, I feel like I'm all alone. I can be sitting in a room full of people with my family, and everybody's, you You just have to know my family. We don't have no inside voice. Our inside voice sounds like your outside voice. And it can be just pure chaos at my house. And I can sit in that chair and feel all alone. But the attack that has come lately has been, nobody in this church accepts me. Nobody wants to hear what you have to say. Nobody in this church thinks you're anointed. That's been going on for a while. And I finally come to this realization, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It only matters what I do for God, and I make him happy. Amen. But we all find ourselves, I don't care who you are. Brother Stewart has found himself in some very dry places at times. My mom and my dad did. I can remember a time, and I'm never going to finish this lesson, but I can remember a time when my mom and dad walked through some of the darkest valleys, and nobody was their friend except one couple. And I'll never forget meeting that couple at Burger King and Walker, and those two people putting their arms around my parents and saying, no matter what, we love you, we support you, we got your back. But when you're in the wilderness, it's not always a bad place to be in the wilderness. You know, you think about it, I probably shouldn't even say this from the pulpit, but what's that movie with Tom Hanks and the ball? Castaway. Think about he's on that island, you know, and he's got nobody. You know, if you're a spiritual person, he'd talk to a ball. But if we were there, who would we talk to? Who would we find ourselves communing with? So sometimes that's why we end up in the wilderness, so that we can draw closer to God. It's not to punish us in any way. Okay? Sometimes the wilderness is not a bad place to be. Sometimes when everything else is chaotic around you, sometimes you need to be in the wilderness just so, Sister Tanya, you can push the sounds of everything else away. I'm sure, and I don't mean to make her cry, or to offend her in any way, but Sister Tanya's mom is going through cancer, you know, and maybe the doctor's report is not good, but I will tell you this. I'll talk about something that I do know. I do know that Sister Nella's brother's outcome, according to the doctors, is not good at all. There is no hope. But there is hope in Jesus. Right. There is hope. Right. And so sometimes when we find ourselves in the wilderness, it makes us draw closer to God. And so sometimes that's the whole purpose of it. Just to drown out all the sounds that are around us and cleave to him, cling to him, and draw closer to him. You may not, in that season, you may not feel like you're moving forward. You may, but in that season, you may also find a whole lot of peace. Think about if the only person you have to talk to is God. Eventually, you're going to get past, oh, woe is me. And you're going to start worshiping, and you're going to start asking him to speak back. I bet that guy on Castaways, if he was there long enough, which he was hoping that ball would talk back to him. Now, I want to say maybe, I spent so long, but maybe he began to imagine that it did. But we don't have to imagine that Jesus talked to us. We know that he talks to us. He talks to us in many different ways. The second one is warring season. Warring season is a time when you encounter so much opposition, so many setbacks. You may find yourself ill, struggling financially, doing battle with others, family members, co-workers, your neighbor, whoever. This season seems to bring a great deal of pressure, anxiety. But the warring season, in that warring season, you may experience turbulent unrest, attacks from opposing people or forces. It's important to know to be able to identify where the attacks are coming, okay? A lot of times, is it okay if I share just a little bit? Okay, so Sister Nella's brother is sick. Her niece, his daughter, and I are extremely close. She's like my sister. And I see fear every day in her eyes. And she's clinging to me to give her some type of answer. And so one day we were sitting there, and I knew it was fixing to come out of her mouth. She didn't understand why this happened. And immediately I looked at her and I said, it is not God that did this. I said, we are born into sin. That's what the Word of God says. This is Adam and Eve's fault. This is where the adversary attacked them in the Garden of Eden. And they listened, and they didn't obey God. And because they didn't obey God, we are born into sin. God, we don't serve a God that says, okay, well, if you won't serve me, I'll do this. Okay? We serve a God that gave us a will. And with that will, He wants you to love Him on your own. Now, you think about it, if Scott had a gun and he held it to my head, or he took it and held it to Salem's head and told me, if you don't do this, I'm going to blow her away. He could almost get me to do whatever he wanted me to do. Right? That's not how God is. God doesn't want us to do anything for Him because He's forced us to. He wants everything we do to be out of love for Him. So when these attacks come, you got to know where they're coming from. How many times, and we've probably all done it, at some point in time in our life, been under attack, and I don't know why God put this on me. I don't know. I have done that in the last year and a half. Matter of fact, in October, I come here and I told Mr. I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't. It's probably going to shock her because she had no idea. And it was going to confirm a text message that you sent me in that month. But I came here and I said, I can't do this. I have no idea what God was thinking, Brother Stewart, when He took my daddy. If we're this close to the rapture happening, why did He take him? Because I can't get these people to heaven. And I can't get them to heaven. I can't get you to heaven. You can't get me. But we can help one another. We can set the course. We can encourage one another. And that's what my job is to set the course for my family. I'm the one that's seasoned, or supposed to be. So God didn't take my daddy to say, ha, 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 ha. Life happens. It happens. And this is the thing I've told people. I just had this conversation with a young man in my home last weekend. My dad had COPD. Why did he have that? Because he smoked all of his life until he gave his heart to God and God delivered him. He reaped what he sowed. But get this. It could have been far worse, Sister Nella. He could have suffered with cancer because of what he had done. But even that, he could have smothered to death. He could have gotten to the point, because that's what COPD does. It gets you to the point you can't draw your next breath. But my daddy never got like that. If Aunt Lou was in here, she would tell you that afternoon, and a lot of our family was there that evening, his legs was bothering him. He couldn't get comfortable in the bed. James and Trace, I think it was, turned that bed every way but upside down. And at some point, they finally got him in a position where he fell asleep. And he never woke up again. I did not know that when he fell asleep, that was going to be it. I thought that the morning would come. But about 4:30, 5 o'clock, I went home about 2 in the morning because I was hurting so bad. And maybe it was later. But when I got home, it wasn't long. I was sitting in my chair and Luke called and said, he's gone. But see, God still blessed him. Because it could have been so much worse. Maybe, I don't know, what if he wouldn't have given his life to God 30-something years ago? He may have died at home, all alone, struggling struggling to breathe. But that's not how God showed him mercy. So we can't blame God. We can't blame God for things that we do to ourselves. My daddy had nobody else to blame but himself. The cancer my husband had leukemia. It wasn't anything we did, nothing he did that caused it. It was just, he had leukemia. It was it was in the blood. And thank God, God healed him, and he's been in remission now for 20 years, I think. So we have to know when we're under attack or when we're in a season, why are we here? We know God is not causing our financial situations. In James's case, when he has a financial situation, he can blame his wife because she's overspent, she's given it to the kids, or, she screwed the checkbook up. And I did that not too long ago with our car insurance. And we paid a price, a hefty price one month because I had messed up. But we have to remember that when we're in the warring season, that those attacks come, that we don't blame God. Remember, he is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in trouble. That's what Psalms 46:1 says. We must remember that the devil and his forces are our adversary and our enemies, not God. Not God. 9 times out of 10, when you're there, God's going to come to your rescue. The winning season. Everybody likes to win, don't we? The winning season could also be called the grace season, where everything in life seems to be going well. Maybe you are receiving blessings on every hand. Money issues seem to be well. There is no illness in your body or in your family. Your ministry is going great. People are calling you out of the blue to come and preach for them. Everything is great. All is well for the moment or for the season. This is a time of favor and grace. In this season, this is not a season to take a break from your prayer life. This is not a time to stop going to the house of God. This is not a time to stop fasting because everything's going great. But how many times do we find ourselves when we're on the mountain and everything is good? That's the winning season that we seem to sit back and breathe and we forget about praying and fasting as much as when we're in the battle. When we're in the battle, we're getting up. It's no problem getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and crying out to God for 2 hours when we're in the battle because we need his help. We need him to come to our rescue. But when we're on the mountain, life is grand. What do I need God for? On the mountaintop is where you better be that squirrel that's storing up your nuts, your food for the winter, because I promise you, that season's going to cycle back around, and you're going to find yourself in a battle again. Really, in this season, these things shouldn't be difficult at all. It should be easy to pray. It should be easy to fast. I don't know that it's ever easy for me to fast. That is my live. And if you remember the text Brother Stewart sent out, you'll understand what I said, what I mean by Malia. That is the absolute, that is the one thing that I have the hardest trouble with is pushing back food. And just like the seasons of time, things start to change, and we enter another season. We will call this season the season of waiting, or the season of rest. In this season, God may be calling for you to give your body some time off. Or maybe here is where he wants you to commune with him. There's nothing wrong with having a Sabbath in your life. Okay? Everybody needs it. I don't care how great you think you are. I don't care how many steroids you take. Okay? For you men or whatever. There is going to come a time in your life that if you don't stop and take some time to recover, to recoup, to rest, your body's going to give out and it's going to demand that you rest. Okay? Matthew 11:28, the New King James Version says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. At times in our lives, we get so caught up in what is going on with the things around us that we don't stop to hear from God. If you ever had a small child, I had 2 of them that I was raising, and my husband worked off a lot, so that meant I had to be both of us at times. And both boys was hot and heavy into sports, and it seemed like we were constantly getting home, dropping stuff off, and running out the door again. And my house never stayed clean, and it just was a cycle. We were so busy. And guess what? There were times that I forgot. I don't think you forget. It's a choice you make. There was times that I said, you know what, I'm just so busy that I'm going to wait and pray when I go to bed tonight. I'm going to go ahead and get my day started. I need to do this, this, and this. And I'll pray tonight when I go to bed. And I pray at night, every night I go to bed. And guess what happens? I fall asleep. So then therefore, back in those days, I had not gotten up in the mornings. I had not prepared myself for the day. So then I was trying to play catch up. But in this season of life, it is here that we just might get our next great message. Our next burden might be birthed. It is in the waiting that we draw from the well of living waters. Isaiah 40 and 31 says, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. I'm sure that you could come up with a whole lot of other different seasons besides the 4 that I've talked about. Something that you might have faced, and maybe you named it a different season in your life than the 4 that I named. But what is more important, maybe not so much as what you call those seasons, but if you recognize those seasons. If you can recognize that you are in the wilderness, and you can recognize I'm fixing to go from the mountaintop to the valley. If you can recognize that, then chances are, just before you come down off that valley, that mountain, if you haven't been doing it, you're going to start praying. You're going to start storing up for what you're going to need in the wilderness. Seasons can overlap at times, and they may be doing the right things at the right time. You may be doing the right things at the right time and all the right way, and still have opposition. How many of you can get up if you have a checklist and you prayed that morning for 2 hours and you fasted all day the day before and you just doing everything that you know to do, everything the Word of God tells you to do, and you still feel like you're always under attack. Those are just seasons. And guess what? The Word of God says joy comes in the morning. This too shall pass. But guess what? You'll find yourself back in that season again at some point in time. So what I suggest is that when you're in this season, whatever season you're in, take note. How many of you ever heard when you pray for something and that prayer is answered, write it down. I prayed for 2 years that Weston and Trace would come back to God. I prayed for 32 years that James would come to church with me. 32 years. And now I can write beside that prayer request, God answered it. Because now He comes. Keep a record. Keep a record of when you were in the wilderness, when you were in a warring season, when you were in the winning season, when you were waiting, and take note of what happened. It's nothing wrong with getting a notebook and writing things down. So that when you're in the heated battle, you can go back and say, wait a minute, at this time, I drew strength from this. I drew strength from the Word of God. These are the scriptures that I read during that time, and they brought peace to my soul. Maybe if I read these again, I'll do it again. Maybe I can listen for the voice of God and he'll talk to me again. He did over here in this winning season or in this warring season. He told me what to do. Maybe he'll talk to me one more time. And let us not be, Galatians 6 and 9, and I'm closing. King James Version says, and let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint